welcome everybody to today's lesson. Good night or good evening or good afternoon. I mean, by the time, class is about on, it'll probably be about the afternoon. Today, we're going to be learning about connecting poetry not only to our everyday lives, but how it incorporates, deciphering the meaning from it so that way you can write a better thesis and an overall better essay, say that theoretically maybe one of your tests or one of your future English classes might present to you, and they go like, so what does this poem mean to you? What do you think, you know, this sort of poem is going to shape like an essay, right? So moving into the lesson, we're gonna begin with I just realized it's very, very bright here, with a brief sort of haiku. Now the haiku says, and obviously there would be a little handout with most of like the warm-up and then the next poem as an example as well. So this haiku says, not even for a moment do things stand still. Witness color in the trees. Now, what type of poem is this? Now, I obviously already revealed that it was a haiku, but I would have this think out loud with the students. And obviously, I'm missing a slide here because I asked what literary devices there are. But depending on the grade level we choose, we might not be going as deep into the literary devices. But theoretically, if I was teaching high school, I probably would include literary devices, such as like you can't really kind of decipher a lot of literary devices since it's just a 3-lined haiku. It's very it paints mostly like a picture. Okay, so moving on with the lesson, I would then have a entire class discussion about the haiku. So I would ask the class to answer each of these questions, maybe take about like 5 minutes, be like, what does this poem mean to you? How does interpretation differentiate? How does it differentiate from person to person, whoever read the poem or whoever took in that sort of meaning? What would you have as a thesis of this poem's meaning and why? So then each of the students can sort of develop that sort of critical thinking about poems and their overall meaning. And obviously that kind of falls under the sort of metacognitive strategies that, one would sort of display in overall classroom thinking because it's technically a think out loud. Okay, so moving on with the lesson again, there's another poem that I would obviously hand out as papers. And so the poem reads, when tired, you feel the most alive. When rested full, dead. In other words, or not at all, I'm tired, but at the same time I never sleep. Madness to madness. Perhaps I'll get to know him, or whomever they may be, when I sleep full. So I have a couple of questions lined up over here. It's the same sort of rhetorical questions again, like what is the feeling of the poem? How does the poem make you feel? What are some points you would make while writing an essay? So that's when you would make these students sort of critically think more, because there's more lines to this poem. It's an example of a prose poem, so there's a lot more textual evidence that you can use to develop a lot of thought within each of these students. So what I would have next is what I call a partner turn. So basically this kind of incorporates the peer learning so each of the students are sitting next to like what I would call a buddy, but it's mostly like classmates and randomized seating, just to incorporate, like I don't know, maybe develop friendships. You never know, but regardless, they would turn to their partner and discuss the feeling and what the meaning behind the poem is. And then one partner would probably take notes, and then the other, or whoever is comfortable sharing in front of the class, once we reconvene in about maybe, I'd say like 2, 3 ish minutes, whatever, then we would share the developed overall consensus of thought that each of these sort of like groups of partners thought. And then that would lead very much into hitting both categories of, obviously you succeed in incorporating that sort of like peer discussion, but then you're getting an overall sense of, like thinking out loud. And that overall class discussion is very good in terms of figuring out a meaning of some sort of poem, right? And that's sort of the great thing about poetry, is because it's so deep on so many levels. You can decipher it line by line if you wanted to. You could read the whole poem and then feel it, but looking at this poem, no matter how the students look at it, right? And it could be the same thing with the haiku poem. It's just so in depth of connecting these students to their overall feelings that if you do it right, you can make people love poetry and love sort of English, which is very, very fascinating if you do it right. I had a lesson where, I kind of struggled, but it was my first lesson. So for a closure, right, the fun thing is that I was like, hey, that last poem as an example that I passed out, I actually wrote that. That's something that I wrote. You guys explored my sort of feeling. So now what I want you guys to do is to take maybe 5 minutes, write to the best of your abilities, whatever you're feeling, at a poem. Like it could be a haiku, prose, whatever. If you want to try to some sort of Shakespearean dialect, you can. So stresses, worries, feelings, or if you just have a random hunt or a phrase you want to use and follow, you can. So then I have them sharing amongst their partners. They can read the poems to one another, discuss meaning or whatnot. Or I also gave them the option, if anybody in the class feels okay sharing out loud their poem, they can read it, and then afterwards that would lead to some sort of discussion. Again, it's the same thing with developing that sort of critical thinking. Not only that, but you're connecting these poems to the students' lives, and you're also helping them explore themselves as well. So maybe that sparks some sort of interest for whatever student who might actually take a liking to poetry, or you're kind of like developing like a third eye in terms of looking at simple literature, in terms of very decipherable, like I kind of call poems the Rubik's Cube of literature, because there's so many ways that you can sort of solve that sort of cube, So with this lesson, you're hitting both pure learning and sort of going along the lines of metacognitive strategies, just through the simplicity and the complexity of poems. And the way that you can sort of move students along in this direction is not only fun for you, but it's going to be fun for no matter who is taking the lesson. So that's all my time. Thank you. Sorry for my little vlogging pose.